You really think you can stop this? Look at you. It's over.
Get your hands off that gate, sweetheart. This house belongs to the bank now. Nathaniel Voss said it loud. Loud enough for the reporters he'd invited himself. Loud enough for the whole block to hear. Adele Carter didn't flinch. She kept both hands on the wrought iron her father had bolted into the brick in 1961. And she said, quiet and even, my mother died in that house 3 weeks ago. Give me until sundown. Nobody on the courthouse lawn said a word. Nobody moved. A dozen neighbors just watched a 56-year-old school janitor beg a man in a $1,000 suit for a few more hours of her own front porch. He had no idea who she really was. And by sundown, Nathaniel Voss would understand exactly what he had done. Have you ever been underestimated by someone who mistook your quiet for weakness? Let me take you back. 6 months earlier. Adele Carter woke at 5, the way she had for 30 years, in a small rented apartment 2 miles from the house she grew up in. She made 1 egg, folded 1 slice of bread around it, and ate standing at the counter so she wouldn't be late. By 6:15, she was at Jefferson Elementary, running a mop bucket down a hallway that smelled like pencil shavings and floor wax, humming hymns under her breath, because the quiet of an empty school before the children arrived was the only real quiet she got. She drove a 1998 Ford pickup with 211,000 miles on it. She packed her lunch in a brown paper bag, folded it flat at the end of the week, and used it again. People at the school called her Miss Adele and never asked her much else, because there wasn't, as far as anyone could tell, much else to ask. She fixed the wobbly leg on the 3rd grade reading table herself rather than fill out a maintenance form. She kept peppermints in her apron pocket for kids who cried in the hallway. Twice a year, when a family couldn't cover the field trip fee, an envelope with exact cash appeared in the front office with no name on it, and nobody ever thought to connect it to the woman with the mop. But 3 miles away, in the house on Delancey Street, there was a locked cedar chest that told a different story, if anyone had thought to look. The house belonged to her mother, Ruth Carter, who had taught piano in the front parlor for 41 years to nearly every child on that side of town. $2 a lesson in 1975. 40 by the time she stopped. Ruth had raised Adele alone after Adele's father died in a mill accident when Adele was 9. And the settlement check that came after his death. $11,000. More money than Ruth had ever held in her life. Never once went toward anything soft. Ruth put it into land. Small parcels. Unglamorous. Unwanted. The kind of lots nobody else wanted in 1979. She taught piano by day and studied deeds by night at the same kitchen table under the same yellow lamp. Around Adele's neck, every single day of her life, hung a small brass pendant shaped like a single piano key, worn smooth at the edges. Ruth had given it to her the day Adele turned 12. This isn't jewelry, Ruth had told her. This is a reminder. Every key only makes one sound, but put enough of them together in the right order, and you can build anything. Adele never took it off. Not to clean floors, not to sleep, not once in 44 years. What none of the parents at Jefferson Elementary knew, what none of Adele's neighbors knew, was that the someday fund Ruth had built one small deed at a time had grown, quietly, into something else entirely. A private trust, professionally managed, that by the year Ruth died held real estate and investments worth just north of $9 million. Ruth's dying wish, repeated to Adele 100 times over the years, was simple. Don't let money change how people treat you. And don't let it change how you treat them either. Keep it quiet. Keep it kind. But what Adele didn't know yet was that the land under her mother's own house, 1.5 unremarkable acres on Delancey Street, had just become the single most valuable holdout parcel in the county because a man named Nathaniel Voss needed it badly to close a $42 million retail development, and he had already bought or bullied every other lot on the block. Voss came from money, the way a river comes from rain, inherited, constant, and entirely unearned by him personally.
His family had a wing at the hospital named after his grandfather. His uncle sat on the county commission. His cousin edited the local paper, which meant that whatever Voss did rarely made it to print, and whatever was said about him rarely made it to a second edition. He had done this before, on a smaller scale, a duplex 2 streets over. an auto shop on 9th. Both swallowed into his portfolio through delinquencies that never quite made sense to the people who lost them. Neighbors called it bad luck. Nobody yet called it a pattern. And when Ruth Carter refused 3 separate times in writing to sell the house her husband's death had paid for, Voss found another way in. A county tax clerk named James Odom,
who owed Voss's family a debt nobody discussed out loud, a mortgage quietly co-signed, a job for a wayward nephew, quietly misfiled 2 years of Ruth's property tax payments. Payments Ruth had made in person at the counter with receipts Adele would later find in that same cedar chest, dated and stamped and utterly beside the point once the county's own records said otherwise.
On paper, the house was delinquent. On paper, it was eligible for auction. And paper, as Voss liked to say to the men who worked for him, was the only truth that mattered in this county. Ruth Carter died in her sleep in February, in the front bedroom of that house, 3 weeks before the notice went up on the courthouse lawn. The auction was set for a Thursday in June, 6 p.
M. Courthouse steps. Cash or certified funds only. Full payment by sundown or the property reverted to the highest alternate bidder. Voss made sure of the 6 p.m. slot personally. Sundown in June in that county came at 8:41. That gave whoever showed up exactly 2 hours and 41 minutes to produce more money than most people saw in a decade.
Word got around the neighborhood fast, the way bad news does. Neighbors gathered on the lawn that Thursday not because they thought they could stop it, but because nobody could stand to let Adele stand there alone. Voss arrived 20 minutes early in a car that cost more than the house, trailed by 2 assistants and, not coincidentally, a photographer from the paper his cousin edited. Remember that number. 2 hours and 41 minutes until sundown, because Voss had already forgotten it existed. To him, the clock was decoration. To Adele, it was the only thing in the world. He read the notice aloud himself, enjoying every syllable, drawing the address out slow so the crowd would feel the weight of it. Then he looked at Adele's brown paper lunch bag still sitting on the porch step from that morning, and he smiled the way men like him smile at things they've already decided don't matter. "Nice bag," he said. "Suits the property values around here." A few of Voss's own assistants laughed, quick and nervous, the way people laugh when they know it isn't funny, but know who signs their checks. When Adele stepped forward and asked one more time for an extension, just until sundown, just until her lawyer could reach the bank, he laughed again. Not loud, just enough. "Pat," he said, though her name was Adele and everyone there knew it, "people like you don't get extensions. You get evicted." A woman in the crowd gasped. An old man took his hat off, the way people do at funerals, without quite knowing why. Nobody else made a sound. Watch his face right there. In that exact moment, if you ever go back and rewatch this, that's the last time in his life Nathaniel Voss will smile like that. Then one of Voss's assistants, clearing the porch of abandoned property for the listing photos,
came out carrying a cardboard box, Ruth's sheet music, 40 years of handwritten lesson books, and on top of it all, packed loose because nobody had thought to wrap it. The little cedar box that held Ruth's old tax receipts and the chain that matched Adele's pendant. The assistant dumped the box at the curb. The chain slid loose onto the pavement.
and Voss, stepping past to shake a hand for the camera, put his heel down on it without even looking, snapping the clasp, grinding brass into the asphalt like it was nothing at all, because to him, it was nothing at all.
A teenager standing at the edge of the crowd, a boy named Marcus who mowed half the lawns on Delancey Street, had his phone up the entire time. He didn't say anything. He just kept filming, hands steady, because some part of him already understood that somebody someday was going to need proof of exactly what happened on that lawn. But what none of them knew, not Voss, not the crowd, not even fully Adele herself until that exact moment, was that the someday fund her mother built wasn't a story from the past. It was live. It was liquid. And it had a phone number Adele had never once had to dial in her life. Adele knelt down slowly, picked up the broken chain, and put it in her pocket without a word. Then she stepped back to the wrought iron gate, took out her phone, and made one call. Go back for a moment to a kitchen table 30 years before that lawn, before that box, before
any of it.
Adele was 9 years old the year her father died, sitting across from her mother at the same yellow lamp, counting out coins from a coffee can into stacks of 10. Ruth called it the Someday Fund out loud, so Adele would learn the words before she understood the weight of them. "We're not poor," Ruth told her that night, folding a dollar bill in half the way she folded everything. Careful, exact.
Poor is a feeling people try to give you. Broke is just a number, and numbers change. Adele didn't understand it then. She understood it every single year after, a little more. 26 years earlier, when Adele was 30, Ruth had sat her down at that same kitchen table and told her the truth for the first time, showed her the deeds, the growing folder of statements. The name of the small private firm in the city that had, over 4 decades, turned an $11,000 settlement into a fortune neither of them ever spent. "This isn't ours to flaunt," Ruth said. "It's ours to be ready with." She made Adele memorize one phone number and one instruction. If the day ever comes that someone tries to take what's yours because they think you have nothing, you call this number and you let them find out exactly how wrong they were. Ruth said one more thing that night, and Adele would hear it in her mother's voice for the rest of her life. Anybody can be loud with money. It takes a different kind of person to be quiet with it. Be that person and let the loud ones underestimate you. That's where all your power will live. Adele had never made that call. Not once. Not through 2 decades of driving a truck with 200,000 miles on it. Not through years of brown paper lunch bags. Not even at her mother's funeral. She had honored the quiet the way her mother asked. Until a man ground her mother's chain into the pavement with the heel of his shoe. The voice on the other end of the line was a trust officer named Diane Kessler, who had managed the Carter family's holdings for 11 years. And had been waiting, professionally and personally, for this call for a very long time. "Mrs. Carter," she said, "how much time do you have?" 2 hours, Adele said. Maybe less. At Voss's insistence, the auction proceeded on schedule. He opened the bidding at $42,000, the exact amount of the delinquent taxes, penalties, and fees. A number that made half the crowd wince, because everyone there knew Adele didn't have it. And Voss knew it best of all. Nobody else bid. Nobody else could. He smiled and told the auctioneer to prepare the transfer paperwork. That was when a black car pulled up to the curb, and a woman in a gray suit stepped out carrying a folder, and behind her, walking with the calm, unhurried certainty of a woman who had spent 40 years being underestimated on purpose, came Adele Carter. "I'll take the property," Adele said, "for full payment, in trust. Effective immediately." Diane Kessler opened the folder and handed the auctioneer a certified check for $110,000, enough to cover the delinquent balance, the penalties, and a bid high enough that no one, including Voss, could touch it. Voss's smile didn't move for a full 3 seconds. Then, it did. His face went the color of the paper in his hand. That's not possible," he said. "Where would a janitor get? I'm not just a janitor," Adele said, calm as still water. "I'm the sole trustee of the Ruth Carter Family Trust. $9.2 million as of this morning's statement. My mother built it one lot at a time so that a man exactly like you could never do to us what you just tried to do." She reached into her pocket and set the broken pendant chain gently on the auctioneer's table. "You stepped on the wrong thing, Mr. Voss." Voss looked at the check. He looked at Adele. He looked at the crowd that had gone from silent to something else entirely. Something with teeth in it now. "This is a mistake," he said, quieter now, the loudness gone out of him the way air goes out of a tire. "There's been a mistake." "There has," Adele said, calm as still water, calm as 40 years of quiet had trained her to be. "It just wasn't mine. It was never mine." Nobody on that lawn moved for a long moment. Then somebody started clapping, and it didn't stop.
What Voss didn't know, what he was only beginning to understand as Diane Kessler quietly informed him that the trust's attorneys had already been notified of the 2 misfiled tax payments, was that Marcus's video had been uploading the entire time, and it had already reached 400,000 views before Adele made it back to her own front porch.
By the following Monday, the county tax office suspended Clerk James Odom pending investigation. And within 2 weeks, records surfaced showing Ruth Carter's original 2023 and 2024 tax payments, receipts and all, misfiled under an account that didn't exist. The county attorney opened a formal inquiry. Odom, facing the loss of his pension, gave a statement naming Voss within days.
3 other families on Delancey Street came forward with strikingly similar stories. Payments that vanished, notices that arrived late, auctions that always seemed to favor the same developer, the duplex 2 streets over, the auto shop on 9th, a widow on the corner who had lost her home the year before and never understood why, and now finally did. She wrote Adele a letter that started simply, "Thank you for making them look at us." Voss's entire $42 million retail deal collapsed within the month when his primary lender withdrew, citing reputational risk, and 2 of his other business partners quietly dissolved their agreements the same week. His uncle resigned quietly from the county commission, rather than face a recall vote he knew he would lose. The paper his cousin edited ran the story anyway. It turned out even family loyalty had a circulation number it couldn't survive. A civil suit followed, then a second, then a class action representing 11 families across the county who had lost or nearly lost property under identical circumstances. Voss settled rather than let it reach a jury, a number the Carter Trust's attorneys called a floor, not a ceiling, and a number that for the first time in his life he could not simply write off and forget. The hashtag Give Her Until Sundown passed 2 million views before the video was a week old, and by the end of the summer, Nathaniel Voss's name had become the one thing his family had never let happen to it in 3 generations. A punchline. The county commission, facing a packed public hearing and a local news cycle it couldn't outrun.
Passed emergency reforms within 60 days. Mandatory dual verification for any property tax delinquency before an auction notice could be posted. A 90-day written notice requirement instead of the previous 30. And an independent ombudsman's office for tax disputes, funded in its first year, quietly by an anonymous $1 million gift. 1 year later, the house on Delancey Street had a new sign on the lawn, hand-lettered by a neighborhood kid who'd once taken free lessons there, the Ruth Carter Music House. The front parlor where Ruth had taught $2 piano lessons for 41 years was full again. 3 afternoons a week, no charge. 30 children learning scales on 2 donated uprights.
A scholarship fund in Ruth's name, seated with a portion of the settlement, now covered instruments and sheet music for any family on Delancey Street who asked, no application, no means test, just Adele's word that they needed it, which was the only test her mother had ever used either. Marcus, the boy who had filmed it all on his phone that afternoon, got a full college scholarship the trust quietly funded, not because he asked, but because Adele remembered, the way her mother had taught her to remember, who stands still and bears witness when everyone else looks away. Adele still worked mornings at Jefferson Elementary, by choice now instead of necessity, because she said the quiet before the children arrived was still the best part of her day, and money had never once been the reason she loved it. She still drove the truck. She still packed her lunch in a brown paper bag, folded flat at the end of the week, and used again, not because she had to,
but because some habits aren't about money at all. They're about who you decided to be a long time before anyone was watching.
She wore a new chain around her neck. The pendant on it was the same small brass piano key, the clasp prepared by a jeweler 2 blocks from the courthouse, free of charge, because he'd seen the video too and said it was the least he could do for a story like hers.
If this story moved you, take a second to like it, share it with someone who needed to hear it, and subscribe for more stories like Adele's.
Here's the question I want you to sit with. How many people are quietly carrying more strength, more history, more power than the world ever gives them credit for? The janitor mopping your child's school hallway. The quiet neighbor who never talks about their past. The woman folding her lunch bag flat to use again tomorrow. You never really know what someone is carrying until the day they're finally forced to set it down in front of you. Here's what really gets me about this one. It's not the money. It's that Ruth Carter spent 40 years building something she never once used for herself. Just so that one day, her daughter wouldn't have to stand on a lawn and beg a man like Nathaniel Voss for a few more hours. That's not wealth. That's love with a plan, built one quiet decision at a time. For a moment, neither of them could have predicted, but both of them, somehow, prepared for anyway. So tell me, honestly, is there a someday fund in your own life? Something quiet you've been building that nobody around you knows about yet? Maybe it isn't money at all. Maybe it's a skill, a kindness, a patience you've been stockpiling for the day you'll finally need it. Tell me what it is in the comments. I'd really like to know.